I'm not a huge Blink-182 fan. I do like some of their songs, and I most definitely like Tom DeLonge's guitars. What's not to like? A single Seymour Duncan Invader pickup in the bridge position. One of my favorite, and I think most fun pickups ever made. I've been looking for a Stratocaster body in graffiti yellow with routings for a hardtail bridge for a long time. One time I actually had one on order, and the company then called me a few days later to let me know it was a mistake. They didn't have it in stock and they canceled the order. Finally, I saw an Alder Graffiti Yellow Stratocaster body from Allen Eden about a week ago, and I ordered it. It was on sale for $119, and the link is in this video description. My Tom DeLonge Stratocaster that I'm going to build will have one visible thing that differentiates it from the Fender-made guitar, as my guitar will have a maple fretboard and not the rosewood fretboard that Tom's guitar has. It is still a Fender 70 style neck, with the same mega large head, stock, and bullet truss rod, the only difference being the fretboard material. I purchased it used, and it has some minor chipping around the tuning collars. Looks like someone had a difficult time some time ago removing the tuning collars, and they took a small amount of wood with them. It's not a structural thing, so it'll not affect the tuners from being able to stay securely in the headstock. I installed period correct Fender F-style tuners with split shafts. There are some options if you're looking to build your own guitar in necks. There's a made in Mexico Fender neck that I've seen on Reverb that has a Paul Ferro fretboard that goes new for about $299. I've seen some for even less, and the used versions even less than that. The link is in the description. A used Tom DeLonge guitar neck goes for somewhere in the $600, so good luck with that one. If you're wanting to just buy a Fender Tom DeLonge Signature Stratocaster instead of building one, I've seen some used versions of the guitar in Reverb for the mid-600s and knew it goes for around $1,299. I always give this disclaimer to folks that think I could have just purchased a version of the guitar for about the same as I've spent on the build. Here is my canned reply. It would not be the same. Part of owning a guitar for me is the journey of how it came to be. Buying a guitar is fun, but that period of time where you have that euphoria, the excitement, I assure you is not as long in duration as the amount of time you will experience the same kind of euphoria and happiness while hunting down the parts, putting the guitar together. And then each time after you look at it, you have a special relationship to that guitar because you look at it and you think to yourself, I made that. I've never once looked at a guitar and said, I bought that. The other modification I'm going to do is in the wiring. I'm installing a push-pull 500K pot for the volume that'll provide me with split capability to the pickup. So I'm getting the south coil. I have recently discovered that the Invader pickup sounds really nice in split mode, and it doesn't sound like a useless underpowered humbucker that's been split, creating a single coil pickup. I don't normally like the split coil sound, but I do on the Invader. The neck pocket on the AE body was a little snug, so I did some minor filing on both sides of the inside of the pocket, and then the neck fit perfectly. The circuit build was really easy. There's literally a 500K push-pull pot. That's it. I did learn a valuable lesson with the electronics of this guitar, and I'll cover this later. Installing the bridge was easy enough to do. I had already installed the string ferrules off camera. I had video recorded footage but had accidentally erased the files. I used the same technique that I use on installing a Telecaster bridge to install the bridge on this guitar. I installed 4 1/8 inch screws that are 4 inches long into the 4 center string holes, leaving the 2 outside string holes open. Then I installed 2 strings, a low E string and a high E string, and I actually installed them into the tuners and tightened the strings. Once I could see that the strings were lined up in the same distance from the sides of the edge of the fretboard, I moved forward. I drilled the 3 pilot holes, followed with finishing the drilling with 1/8 inch drill bit for the 3 screws. Then I installed the 3 screws into the bridge. I aligned the pickguard and I drilled and installed the pickguard screws. I did not initially understand why the Fender Tom DeLonge signature guitar has a treble bleed circuit installed with the single volume control. I figured it was just his preference. I learned why you would use a treble bleed circuit in this guitar through the practical use of this guitar, just kind of figuring it out on my own. Let me first make this defining statement. This guitar is pretty much worthless without a treble bleed circuit installed. This is what I ultimately discovered. Without a treble bleed circuit installed, I buttoned everything up and I installed a set of strings. I set the volume at mid and I noticed that the high ends just weren't there, that it was muffled. When I dialed the volume up to full 10, the tone was fine and you had great high frequencies. But then as I'd rotate the volume back down, the high frequencies in the tone just literally dropped off, and by about midway, they were gone, and I was back to the muffled tone. There are many different treble bleed circuit designs. I chose what I think is probably the most common design. It's called the Duncan design. Well, and the one I already had parts for. The technical name for a treble bleed is actually called a high-pass filter. Basically, the simple two-component circuit allows the volume pot to keep the higher frequencies in the output, even as you turn the volume down. The capacitor does most of the work, and the resistor keeps the circuit from removing the bass from the tone, as would just a capacitor by itself without the resistor most of the time. The circuit is really easy to make. I took a 0.001 UF capacitor and then I soldered across the legs of it a 150 k ohm resistor. Really simple to do and cost me less than $1. What's hilarious is you can actually buy these online for like $9 or $10 or more. I pulled the strings back off and I took the pickguard off as well, and I installed the treble bleed circuit that I built, and you solder it across the input and output terminals of the volume pot. Now I'll show it in a diagram on the screen. I closed up the pickguard and I reinstalled the strings. I was really anxious to see what would happen when I plugged it into the amp. After I was tuned up, I tried to play the guitar again. The high frequencies were there and very clear at all levels of the volume settings. Now I understand why he has a treble bleed. I just have not really had a guitar that the need was so apparent like this guitar. So, lesson learned, if you're building a single volume pot guitar, I really recommend you install a treble bleed. Standing back and looking at this guitar, I am very happy with how it turned out. Short of the maple fretboard instead of the rosewood, you cannot really tell the difference between this guitar and the guitar that I'm copying. I ended up building this guitar for about $525 total. Not bad for what I've gotten, and the memories as well.